Hey guys, SimCoder here, and today we are on to the final video on Instagram. The only video that will come after this will be on the redesign, so yeah, this should be the last one, and unless I find something that must be fixed or something like that. So in this video, we'll learn how to do a like system. We'll also make a few changes to the existing code in order to make the performance a bit better and the code a bit cleaner. But yeah, it should be a good one, a fun one. We'll learn how to use Firebase functions because that will be how we are going to count the likes for each post. So yeah, let's do it. If the video is going a little too slow for you, then feel free to change the speed of the video in the video settings. Okay, so coming into our Firestore, I'm going to explain you the Firestore structure, the database structure for this part of the series. So what we are going to do is going to posts. We are going to jump into our user's ID of the post that we are looking at. We are going to jump into the post that we are looking at. This is the post ID. And in here, you can see that we have one other collection called likes. And you can see that we have a field called likes count. So we are going to do this into stages. The first of which is to, whenever a user likes a post, that user's ID is added to as a document to this collection. And whenever a user dislikes a post, it is removed from this collection. This is because we have to keep track of the users that liked the post in order to know if they have already liked the post and in order to remove the like if the user so chooses. Okay, and we have the likes count in order to make things a bit more efficient for everyone, not just the backend, but also for the user. So whenever a user likes a post or dislikes a post, the like count will change accordingly, adding or subtracting one. This will be done using Firebase functions, which we'll do during this lesson. Firebase functions basically allows you to, whenever a document is added, removed, or updated, you can run code on it and do cool things like adding likes or removing likes in this case. You can also do it by HTTP request, but in this case, we'll do directly. It is a listener listening for changes within the collections that we want. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is to change the code somewhat, just like I told you in the introduction for this video. Right now, what we are doing is on the user's reducer, we see that we are keeping track of the users. And this user object contains, this user array, better yet, contains objects of users, and those objects contain arrays of posts, which we then, in the feed, if we come back in here, we can see that we loop through them, we add the posts to a post array, and so on and so forth. So our goal will be to remove these four. And we are doing this because it becomes easier than when we are looking at the likes the currently logged in user has to decide if we are showing the like or dislike button to the user depending on the post and if the user likes or does not like the current post that the user is looking at. So by doing this, all of the logic will be a lot simpler. We are going to be able to access all of the posts that are meant to be shown in the feed directly without having to loop through a big array of users' objects. Okay, so that's the main reason why we are doing this. So coming back into the users, the first thing that we are going to do is to add a new variable which will be used by the feed. I'm going to call it feed. And this feed will contain an array of posts that we already are fetching from the database, so the changes aren't that many, better yet. So I'm going to collapse this, make this bigger. Okay, so on users post state change, we were previously mapping the users, finding the user UID that corresponded to the action UID which we passed along from the action, and then updating that user object with the post that we got from the action. Right now, we are not going to do this. We are going to actually delete this and do instead feed 2 points, open parentheses, and in here it is 2 points. I'm sorry about that. In here, 2 points, there we go. And we are going to say states.feed, action.posts. Because remember, the one action that calls on this function is in the index.js, the fetch user following posts, which sends us an array of posts of that user. So by doing this, we gain direct access to all of the posts that are meant to be in the feed, and thus making everything easier. Okay, so now going into the feed, we are going to make obviously some changes in here. Not that many, it should be easy. So the first thing that we are going to do is to remove this for. Obviously, that's one of the main things that changed while doing this. We are going to add the props.feed to the variables which trigger an update of this useEffect function, because whenever props.feed changes, then this function has to be rerun and we have to sort the posts again. However, we aren't able to access the feed there. So in here, instead of users, which we are not going to use in this screen, in these components, we are going to instead call up feed from users, don't forget yes, state. Okay, and this way we gain access to everything that we need. However, coming back in here, we are not going to sort the posts because this variable isn't populated. We are, however, doing something a bit different, which is props.feed.sort, and there we go. Now we can simply come in here and set posts to props.feed. Another thing that we are going to do is to come in this if condition to make sure we are doing everything correctly, and add props.following.length is different from 0. This is just correct a bug where if following was 0 and we didn't have any posts to sort through yet, then this if would be triggered, and there's no need for that. So add that simple condition in order to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, so for this part, we are mostly done. We are able to remove these posts, and there we go. As you can see, this function is a hell of a lot more simple. Now what we have to do is to gain access to the current state of the users, like for each and every single post. So for that, we are going to come into the index.js in our Redux action, and we are going to double up on the fetch users following posts, as the next function that we are going to write is a bit similar. Okay, so instead of being fetch user following posts, we are going to call it fetch user following likes. And we are going to receive the UID of the user that we are currently fetching the posts of, and the post ID for each and every single post. This is because up top in the fetch users following posts, we are going to do a loop through each and every single post, calling on this function, dispatching to this function better yet. So in here, let's say let I equals to 0, I smaller than posts.length, and finally say I++. Okay, open curly brackets, there we go. And in here we are going to dispatch to this function. So I'm going to grab its name and say dispatch, add the function, and in here, because we already have the UID, there's no need to change that. However, we must do posts within parentheses I, and it is posts, not posts. Okay, and in here we are going to pass, yet again, the ID of the post. This is going to loop through every single post and call this function. Okay, easy enough. Now we must do some changes to this Firebase Firestore request. So in here, below collection, as you might remember from the database structure that I showed you in the beginning, we are going to say post ID. Then we are going to remove this order by, because there's no need for that. We are going to say collection likes, and then we are going to say doc Firebase auth dot current user dot UID. As you might remember, This is because we are looking in this document. Or better yet, if this is the currently logged in user's ID, we are looking in here to see if it exists. Easy enough, and we are then able to do everything that we want. Okay, so in here, we are not going to do a simple get. We are going to listen for changes within this value, because anytime that like changes, either the user likes or dislikes a post, then we want this function to be triggered yet again in order to change the data that we have on the post. And for that, we are going to use onSnapshot like we did in a previous lesson. And I don't remember exactly what for, but we've already used it. So anytime this path value changes, this onSnapshot will be called, and we are able to update the value within our array. Okay, so in this case, we are going to do something quite similar to what we did, and I'm going to remove all of this. Yep. We are going to do something quite similar that we did for the UID in this fetch users following posts, where we simply went through the object that's retrieved to us in the snapshot and try to find the data that's relevant to us. So in here, the data that's relevant to us is not the UID, but the post ID. This is because, if you might remember, we have an array with feed which contains posts. So if we have the post ID, we are able to quickly find the post in the array that we want to change the status of. Okay, so I did my homework, and I found out that if you go into snapshot.z.path.segments3, you are able to get the post ID. And by doing this, we are able to quickly find out what the hell is going on. This is because we don't have an easy way or a known, that documented way of getting the post ID in this case. So we have to really dig deep into the object and see where it is exactly. And this is the most easy way of doing this. So yeah. Then we are going to say, let current user like equal to false, and this will be the variable that contains the boolean saying if the user likes the post that we are currently looking at or not. And in order to know if the user likes it, the only thing that we must know is if the user exists within this collection. So if the snapshot dot exists, then that means that the user likes the post. And if the user likes the post, then current user like will be true. Easy as that, okay? Then we must dispatch it to the reducer. However, it won't be using this variable, it will be another one. And for that, I'm going to come in here and create yet another constant, which instead of post, in this case, it will be likes. Grab that variable name and paste it into the string. Paste it here, go up top into the constants, and add it at the end. Just like that, and there we go. Let's try to find the code. There we go. Okay, so what is going to be dispatched to the reducer? Well, in this case, it is really simple. We are going to dispatch the post ID and current user like. This way, the reducer will know everything that it must know in order to make the changes to the post. Okay, so going into users, we are going to add the constant yet again, users likes state change. Let's go below. And below user post state change, we are going to add yet another case, which will be for the user likes state change, 2 points, and we are going to return something. In this case, I'm going to grab what's up top, because the structure is basically the same. So the difference is we don't have users following loaded in here, because that's for these parts. We do have the feed, and the feed will be a bit different. So in this case, we'll say states.feed.map, and we are going to try to find the post that corresponds to the post ID that was passed along in here within this post ID. So for that, we are going to say post. Then this corresponds to the post.id. And we want to find a post.id that is equal to action.postID. Okay? And if that post is found, then we are going to make the changes to it. If the post is found, we say within curly brackets post, comma, current user like, I'm going to grab that, will be equal to action.current user like. And if the post is not found, this is just error handling. And if the post is not found, then that means that probably something went wrong within our request. So it is really unlikely that this is ever called. But if the post is not found, then we'll retrieve post. One other thing that I'm going to change and that I warned you about in the previous lesson is that in here we are going to simply return initial data. This is because we must also clear the feed whenever we clear the data. So this is the easiest way of going about things. I'm going to go into user and do exactly the same thing. Okay, so now we are basically done. However, in actions.post in the user post change, I made an error I just noticed from before. In here, it must have 3 dots in order to add the action.post into the feed without any issues whatsoever. Okay, so that's it. Now everything should be working, and the current the post feed should have the current user likes. So now in the feed, I'm going to add a console log for the posts in the use effect, and we are going to see what happens whenever the user is loaded. So let's open up our database, and I'm going to open up the terminal. Now, as you can see in here, we have an array, and I can't scroll up for some reason, but this terminal is not working with me. But we can see that in the first post, we have the current user like set to true, and in the second post, we have the current user like set to false. Now, if you come in here, you see that this is the first post, and it is the user ID is in there. If you go into the second post, which is this one, you see that there isn't even the collection likes because the user is not there. Disregard this likes count. This was during the testing phase for this lesson. I had to mess a bit with it, so completely disregard it for now. Okay, so now if you come in here and we simply remove this collection, we'll see that it will get updated, this object, and this current user like will be set to false. And let's do it right now. Likes, remove it. A new log is printed, and the current user like is set to false for that post. Okay, so it is working as it should. Now, all that's left is to come in here, or better yet, one of the main parts that's left for the front end is to add a like or dislike to the database. And this is really quite simple. I'm going to grab this Firebase Firestore tree because we are going to use it in this part. So let's go into feed and let's create a couple of functions, one for like and one for dislike. So in this case, we'll create on like press, which will be equal to parentheses, open arrow function, open curly brackets. And in this case, we are going to paste in this Firebase Firestore collection and docs, and we are going to say set to nothing, because we just want the ID to be there. We are going to also create yet another function, but this time it will be for the dislike, on dislike press, better yet. And in this case, instead of set, we are going to say delete. Okay, just like that. Now, going below, let's add the buttons. And the buttons are really simple to add. What we'll do in this case is open curly brackets, and we are going to do a conditional rendering. In this case, it will be for item current user like. So if this is false, do something. If it is true, do something else. The first param will be for if the item current user like is true. And in that case, we are going to show a button. Let's go a bit there. Okay. and this button is a self-closing tag. We are going to enter and say title equals to dislike, and on press, we are going to call up the functions that we just written. So open curly brackets, parentheses, inside the curly brackets, arrow function, and in this case, we'll simply call on dislike press. Okay, so we must pass along a couple of parameters to on dislike press. So on dislike press, we'll need the user ID and the post ID. This is so that we can know where to add or remove the post. So I'm going to also add the same thing for the like. It is necessary as well. Add the user ID, there we go. And in here, it is really quite simple. We can use the item that's being rendered in order to get this information. So for the dislike and for the like is the same thing. In this case, it will be user.uid, comma, item.id. This is the post ID. Okay, so now I'm going to double up on this one by doing 2 points, enter, and add yet another button, but this time it will be for the like. And like. Okay, so now coming into our device, we see that like appears for both the images, for both the posts, and that's because we don't have a like in here. But if we click on the first one, for example, we see that it changes to dislike. And if we reload the page, because Firestore doesn't really update the database or is not used to doing that, we see that likes is added here. Now, if we dislike, then it will be removed and the button changes to like. So it is working just as it should be. Now, all that's left is to show the like count. So let's learn how to do it. So right now, I'm going to move all of this into a folder. I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it frontend. The reason why I'm doing this is because we are going to have a folder called backend, which will contain the Firebase functions. So move all of the data relevant to the frontend into this folder. After that's done, your server will probably crash. And in order to fix that, simply change, and let's go like this. Simply change into the front-end folder and run expo from there. So start -c, and there we go. Now I'm going to go into the main root folder of the project, and I'm going to create a new folder called backend. In this backend, we'll have everything related to the Firebase functions yet again. So let's change into that. And now we are going to go into the Firebase documentation and see how we can deploy our Firebase functions. So in our Firebase documentation, you can see that we have to install Firebase tools, npm install -g for global to install in your whole system, Firebase-tools. You have to have Node.js installed, so make sure that is installed. All of the relevant information on how to do this is in the Node.js website. Okay, so for now, I'm going to go into the terminal and I'm going to install npm install Firebase tools. So after it has finished loading, you are going to do Firebase login in order to log into your account. In this case, I'm already logged in with my account, so there's no need to worry about that, but a window will pop up for you to choose your Google account and make sure you choose the right one. You're going to say Firebase init. This will initialize the project as we want. In this case, we'll choose functions, and you do this by using your arrow keys and the spacebar in order to select or remove a selection. Functions, use existing project. In this case, try to find your project. In my case, it's Instagram dev. Wait a bit. Now you are able to use either JavaScript or TypeScript. I'm going to use JavaScript because that's the one that we are most used to. I'm going to use ESLint, yes, because it is a tool which will help you to keep the code clean and using good code rules, and it will force you to do that or give you warnings if you are not doing that. Install dependencies now. Yes, wait a bit and we'll be right back. Okay, so after the initialization has been completed, you'll get this message. And if we jump into our VS Code, you see that on backend, we get a bunch of things. What's relevant to us is the index.js. In this file, you'll write all of the functions that we need. In this case, we are going to add a couple of imports. The first one will be admin. This will give us access to the database, which we need in order to do anything about the like count. So require Firebase admin. All right. Then we are going to initialize the app, just like we do for the front end, but in this case, it will be on our Firebase functions. And we are going to create a variable called db, which will be admin.firestore. This is the equivalent to, in the front end, doing firebase.firestore. But in this case, we must call Firebase admin, so that's why we are doing this. Okay, so just like I said, we want a function to trigger. Let me go into our database. We want a function to trigger whenever a like is added here. Let's reload that. Okay, whenever a like is added to the likes collection, which doesn't exist here, we are going to add 1 to the likes count. And the same thing for the removal, but decrease 1. Okay, and in order to do this, we must have a trigger for whenever a document is added in that collection. So you do this by saying exports.addLike. This is just the name of the function. It can be anything you want, and it is exports, not exports. I'm going to remove all of this, okay? And we are going to say functions.firestore.document, and now we are going to pass along the structure of the document that we want to access or this function to be triggered with. In this case, it will be the first one, posts. This is the first collection. Then we want a creator ID, but we want to know what the creator ID is. So for that, open curly brackets and say creator ID. By doing this, we'll be able to gain access to a variable with this name, with the value of the creator ID within our function, which is really, really useful. Okay, /user posts / and in this case it will be post ID, then / again for the likes, and finally for the user ID. This is the user that made the like in this point. All right, that's it. Now hit enter in the end and say on create. On create is the trigger for when a document is added. So whenever this user ID is added to this collection, this on create will be triggered. And now what we pass along is snap and context. Open our function, and that's it. Now, what we are going to do is to update these fields whenever a user is added. To do this, it's really simple. All you do is return db, and remember db is admin.firestore, and then we simply go down the tree of the post that we are currently looking at. So in this case, it will be collection, posts, .doc. And now, in order to access the variables that we set up in here, the creator ID, the post ID, and the user ID, for example, what we do is context.params.creator ID. And there we go. We gain access to this value in here. Okay. Then we call the collection user posts, and finally the document of the post ID. Okay, that's it. And there's a dot in here and a dot in here. Let's do it like that. Okay. Now, in order to update the fields, all that we do is update. So update, open curly brackets, and the field that we want to update is the likes count. And the likes count will be incremented by 1. Now, Firestore gives us a really cool function where instead of fetching the data that's in there and incrementing by 1, we can use a function that does that automatically. And that function is called increment. So in order to use, you say admin.firestore.fieldValue.increments, and you choose by how much you want to increment. In this case, it will be 1. And there we go. It is done. We don't need to do anything else to the add like function. However, we want to write yet another function for the remove like. So I'm going to copy it, paste it below, call it remove like, and everything is the same. The only thing that changes is that instead of increment 1, you'll say increment -1. And this is because it doesn't, a decrement function doesn't exist, so this is how we do it. Now all that's left is to deploy these functions. And to do this, we'll go into our terminal yet again, and we are going to simply do Firebase deploy. And by doing this, it will start automatically deploying. However, keep in mind that if you don't have a paid plan set up in your Firebase account, then it will not work. There's a trick around it, however. And this is only valid for 2020. After that, you'll have to set up a payment plan. But don't worry, Google offers you $300 for you to spend, which if you are doing this as a school project or something, you'll never reach that point. Or no, don't take my word for it. Obviously, it depends how much you use it, but it is really hard to spend $300 on this. Now, in order to, if you don't want to set up billing plan, all that you have to do is to go into package, the last one in here, and change the node to version 8. If you change to version 8, then Firebase won't ask you for the billing account in your Firebase project, but I'm going to keep it at 12. I have it set up. And remember, it probably won't cost you a single thing. It might take some time to run, so let's wait a bit. So I tested the app, and there is one small mistake that I made, which is really important in this case. In here, it has to be on delete. The remove, the callback is on delete, so whenever the object is deleted, then delete the object. Without that, it won't work, obviously, so let's deploy again. But in the meantime, let's go into the save component. And this is because we have to add the likes count to it. In this case, it will be 0. And this is because in order for the increment to function, the increment function in here, there must be a value in the database already. Otherwise, it won't work. So let's give it some time in order for these functions to deploy, and I'll be right back. Okay, so it deployed successfully. Let's jump into our application and see if it works. Let's like the first post. And likes count increments, and if you remove it, then it becomes 0. The same thing for the second post. Obviously, if it works for the first one, there's no reason for it not to work here, and there we go. So it is working. Everything is as it should be. Now, there's not a lot more to do. It is only UI based. So for this reason, the next video on this lesson, on this series, will probably be on the redesign. I'm getting it ready, and I hope to get it out as soon as possible. So if you enjoy it, please go into into my website at simcoder.com and check it out. There will be an APK for you to test on, to play with, to do anything that you want. So yeah, that's it. That's all for today. That's all for this series. If you like this series, then please do leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment. I always enjoy reading those. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow, and ciao.